welcome to Global Health in 60 Seconds. I'm your host, Hisra Ahmed, and today I'm joined by Abid Hamid, board advisor, net to multiple international businesses, and former group CEO of a leading private equity and venture capital specialist firm. Abid has built and grown companies across 20 countries, overseeing more than 35 investments worldwide. Abid's ability to navigate complex markets, lead diverse teams, and deliver sustainable growth goes beyond building stronger businesses. It offers a blueprint for strengthening healthcare systems too. His expertise show how strategic leadership, adaptability, and collaboration can bring both commercial success and global health progress. I'm delighted to welcome Abid to our podcast today.
Thank you very much. Very, very kind of you to invite me.
So, Abid, you've built and scaled businesses in some of the world's most challenging and diverse markets.
Yeah.
What leadership principles have been central to your success?
I don't think there is a difference between your leadership, whether it's in the Western world, the developing world, the third world, or whatever. I think you need to have some basics in place, and that is that you give a clear message. People need to trust you. They need to see you lead from the front. And I think you have to be, one of the things that you really need to have is consistency, right? Consistency of message, consistency of vision, and what it is that you're trying to do. So from a business point of view, I don't think there are obviously issues that change, but from a leadership point of view, I don't think leadership changes by culture or environment.
Abid, when we were talking earlier, you mentioned adaptability, resilience, and strategic investment. Now,
Yeah,
they're also critical to building robust healthcare systems. How do
yeah.
you see the private sector playing a role in global health?
Well, private sector by nature has to have a profitability exercise, right? Unless they're going to do it from a philanthropic perspective. So I think the first thing is that, if you look at global trends today, I mean, things like, very simply, things like digital solutions. You look at the number of people that wear a watch that now tells them their heartbeat, their, blood pressure, their fitness, etc. That's probably never going to be possible without private enterprise,
Mhm.
right? Because it needs so much investment. How that's adapted into public, right, is a, I guess, a PPE kind of private public kind of collaboration exercise that governments have to drive. But if you're a private company, unless you're doing it as part of a philanthropic exercise, you've got to have responsibility to your shareholders. They're the ones who take the risk, et cetera, et cetera. So I think governments have, they've got so many tools that they could use to help make those decisions. They could give, tax discounts. They could give, multiple things that would encourage international or local health organizations or companies to actually drive those solutions into the public sector. I think if you just sit there and say, why shouldn't international private companies do it? Well, it's not that simple, right?
Mhm.
Different mandate.
I agree, Abid. Now, going back to the point that you've led operations across regions with very different infrastructures and resources.
Yeah.
What lessons from business growth could help bridge disparities in health access on a global level?
Look, I'm no expert on health, but I mean, if you're not sensitive to cultural differences, right? If you're running a business or you're setting up any organization, you are going to be unsuccessful. You cannot bring your culture and take it to another place and expect them to just adapt to that, right? There is a quid pro quo. You have to understand where you're going, what matters there, and how it works. Simple things like family values in certain parts of the world are so huge, so big, which unfortunately in the West we've kind of diluted. So you have to understand the route to market is not just marketing, right? It's a route to market is a cultural exercise where adaptability of new things is going to take a while. And you have to explain it in their language, if you like. Not, I don't mean language as in spoken language, but in terms of what they find acceptable and adaptable, right? You can't just turn up and go, well, look, we did, I don't know, X TikTok and God knows what else, and therefore we're going to be successful in this market. You're not. Because health, for example, and certainly, if you look at family cultures and family values in a lot of the world, they're driven by the matriarch in the family. And that's your go-to point, and that person isn't necessarily on a phone looking at whatever social media you're doing. So I think it's a grassroots exercise if you want to get it across the line. And Gen X is a different ballgame. Gen X is adapting AI. I think there was some statistic I read that 81% of Gen X look at medical advice by AI.
That's
I mean, which is outrageous, but quite interesting.
well, AI
Yeah,
has taken over, Abid, as we know that, and
sure,
we have to
sure.
adapt to it.
Yeah, but again, that we do have to adapt, but in certain parts of the world, it's not going to work. Just isn't. They might have a phone, but they're just not interested in that piece of the social media platforms that we're looking at.
No, I agree. Thanks, Abid. Now, we talked earlier about how partnerships between businesses and healthcare accelerate progress in addressing global health challenges that we currently face, like inequality in healthcare access, say workforce, like shortages of healthcare workers in low-income regions, etc. How to
Yeah.
tackle?
Wow, that's the million-dollar question, right? We are importing, and we being the Western world, and I include the US in this. If you look at the medical profession in the US and Europe, it's pretty much made up of imported talent, whether it be from Eastern Europe or it may be from another environment. Our homegrown markets just become too small, and our health structures, like if you take the NHS, for example, you could put as much money as you like in the NHS. I don't think it's going to work because the infrastructure needs to be changed. It was designed for a different number of people. It was designed to do a completely different function. It's overworked. So, is there a solution to that? Well, I think there's only a long-term solution to that. There isn't a short-term solution to that. The short-term solution is what everybody's doing, which is kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul, right? So we're taking people from other markets to bring them here, and yes, for that individual, it's a better life and a better standard of living, perhaps. But for that market, they've just lost a doctor, a surgeon, or a nurse, or whatever it may be, which doesn't really help your question. Your question is about global parity, and I think that doesn't happen unless you spend a huge amount of money on education and training so that they can have sustainability and a parity across the line. Also, just very simple things. If you're a young person and you wanted to be a nurse or a doctor, you're generally bright, you're generally motivated, so you've got to pay these people. You got to pay these people good salaries and good wages so that they stay in the profession or they choose the profession, rather than go off and become bankers or lawyers or accountants. And there's nothing wrong with that, but just so that it's a holistic, all a 360 solution. It's not a if you do A, then B will happen. In my mind, yeah.
Thank you, thank you. I had Dr. Muhammad Iqbal on the podcast earlier, and he completely, whatever you've said, it completely aligns with what he said as a challenge, especially in NHS. So,
Sure.
final question, Abid, in 60
Yeah.
seconds, as per the podcast.
60 seconds. Okay.
What one action should global leaders take now to strengthen community health and resilience worldwide?
I mean, I think the one thing that global leaders can certainly do is open access to knowledge, right? Provide as much knowledge to as many people globally and for free. Knowledge should not be at a price. And I think if we can do that, we'll enthuse more people into the environment. We'll get better prevention rather than cure. And I think global leaders could do that tomorrow morning if they wanted to do it. So we should be supporting local colleges, local universities all over the world with free knowledge, not
Especially
paid
AI,
for.
supporting AI
I
training.
mean, how you transmit that knowledge is, there are multiple ways, but the reality is we could do that today. Press of a button, and that would change quite a lot. Maybe not enough, but it would change quite a lot. It'll certainly allow people to make better decisions, because the more knowledge you have, the better decisions you make, especially in the medical field. So I think, with remote medical solutions today, that's an easy parity exercise if you wanted to get global health on a parity set view. So yeah, that would be my call, my first and only 60-second solution.
Thank you so much, Abid. You were spot on time. Really, really appreciate, your thoughts that you shared with us today. And it's been a pleasure having you on the podcast. Thank you.
Thank you very much.